Sarah Martinez walked slowly through the crowded animal shelter, her heart heavy with each step. The sounds of barking dogs and meowing cats filled the air, but she barely noticed. Her 8-year-old daughter Emma had been asking for a dog for months, especially after their elderly neighbor's golden retriever had passed away. Emma had loved that dog-like family. The problem was money. Sarah worked 2 jobs just to keep their small apartment and put food on the table. Her husband had left them 3 years ago, and since then, every dollar mattered. She had saved up $30 over 2 months, hoping it would be enough for adoption fees and basic supplies. As she walked past cage after cage, Sarah saw the price tags. Most dogs had adoption fees of $60 to $150. Her heart sank with each number she read. She was about to give up when she reached the very last cage in the corner. Inside sat a small, scraggly dog with matted brown and white fur. His ribs showed through his thin coat and his eyes looked tired and sad. But when he saw Sarah, his tail gave a small, hopeful wag. The price tag on his cage read $9. Sarah stopped and stared. $9 seemed too good to be true. She looked around for a shelter worker and spotted a young woman in a volunteer shirt cleaning nearby cages. "Excuse me," Sarah called softly. "Is this price right?" "Only $9 for this dog?" The volunteer, whose name tag read Jessica, walked over with a sad smile. "Yes, that's right. That's Buddy. He's been here for 8 months now. Nobody wants him because he's not a puppy anymore, and he came to us in pretty rough shape." Sarah knelt down beside the cage. Buddy pressed his nose against the metal bars, and she gently touched it with her finger. His tail wagged a little faster. "What happened to him?" Sarah asked. Jessica sighed. "Animal control found him living under a bridge downtown. He was starving and had been badly neglected. We've gotten him healthy, but he's shy around new people. Most families want younger, prettier dogs. The shelter has been reducing his adoption fee every month, hoping someone would give him a chance." Sarah's eyes filled with tears. She knew exactly how Buddy felt. After her husband left, she often felt unwanted and forgotten too. But Emma had given her a reason to keep going, just like maybe she could give Buddy a reason to trust again. "Can I meet him?" Sarah asked. Jessica's face lit up. "Of course. Let me get him out." When Jessica opened the cage, Buddy stepped out carefully, staying close to the ground. He was smaller than Sarah had thought. Maybe 25 pounds, with patches of brown and white fur that would probably be beautiful once properly groomed. One of his ears stood up while the other flopped down, giving him a lopsided, endearing look. Sarah sat on the floor and let Buddy approach her. He moved slowly, sniffing her hand before gently pressing his head against her palm. When she scratched behind his ears, he closed his eyes and leaned into her touch like he had been waiting months for this moment. "He likes you," Jessica said with surprise. "He usually takes much longer to warm up to people." Sarah spent another 20 minutes with Buddy in the small meeting room. He seemed to sense her kindness and gradually relaxed, even rolling over to show his belly. When she rubbed his stomach, his back leg kicked with joy. "I'll take him," Sarah said finally. The word surprised even her. Jessica beamed. "Really, that's wonderful. Let me get the paperwork." As Jessica went to fetch the adoption forms, Sarah pulled out her phone and called Emma, who was staying with her grandmother after school. "Mom," Emma's excited voice came through the speaker. "Did you find us a dog?" "I think the dog found us," Sarah said, watching Buddy curl up in a sunny spot by the window. "His name is Buddy, and he's been waiting for a family just like we've been waiting for him." Emma squealed with delight. "Can I see him?" "When can we bring him home?" "Soon, sweetheart. Very soon." After filling out the paperwork and paying the $9 adoption fee, Sarah had enough money left for a collar, leash, and small bag of dog food. The shelter also gave her a folder with Buddy's medical records and some basic care instructions. "He's up to date on all his shots," Jessica explained as she walked them to the car, "and he's been neutered. The vet says he's probably about 4 years old, so he's past the destructive puppy phase, but still has lots of good years ahead." Loading Buddy into her old Honda Civic, Sarah felt nervous and excited. She had never owned a dog before, and she hoped she could give him the love and care he deserved. Buddy sat quietly in the back seat, looking out the window with growing interest as they drove through town. When they pulled into the parking lot of their apartment complex, Buddy perked up. Sarah lived in a modest 2-bedroom unit on the ground floor, with a small patio that would be perfect for a dog. She had already checked with her landlord about pet policies and received permission. "This is home, Buddy," she said as she clipped the new leash to his collar. Buddy walked beside her toward the apartment building, his tail wagging slightly. He seemed to understand that something important was happening. As they climbed the few steps to her door, Sarah felt like she was bringing home more than just a pet. She was bringing home hope. Emma was waiting by the window and burst through the door the moment she saw them. "Buddy," she cried, dropping to her knees. But Buddy, overwhelmed by the sudden noise and movement, cowered behind Sarah's legs. Emma's face fell with disappointment. "It's okay," Sarah said gently, putting her hand on Emma's shoulder. "He's just scared. Remember, he's been through a lot. We need to be patient and let him learn to trust us." Emma nodded solemnly and sat down on the floor, speaking in a soft voice. "Hi, Buddy, I'm Emma. I'm going to take really good care of you." Slowly, carefully, Buddy stepped out from behind Sarah and approached Emma. When he sniffed her outstretched hand and gave it a tiny lick, both Sarah and Emma knew their family was finally complete. The first week with Buddy was harder than Sarah had expected. The scared little dog spent most of his time hiding under Emma's bed, coming out only to eat and drink when he thought no one was watching. Sarah worried that maybe she had made a mistake. What if Buddy never adjusted to their home? What if he was too damaged from his past to ever trust again? Emma tried everything to coax Buddy out. She would lie on her bedroom floor, reading books aloud and talking to him in gentle whispers. She saved pieces of her sandwich from lunch to offer him as treats. But Buddy remained fearful, flinching whenever anyone moved too quickly or spoke too loudly. Sarah called the animal shelter for advice. Jessica, the volunteer who had helped them, suggested giving Buddy time and space while maintaining a routine. "Some rescue dogs take weeks or even months to feel safe," she explained. "The fact that he's eating and drinking is a good sign. Just be patient." On the 5th day, Sarah woke up to find Buddy sitting by the front door, wagging his tail tentatively. It was the first time he had approached either of them willingly. "Do you need to go outside, boy?" Sarah asked softly. Buddy's tail wagged faster and he gave a small whine. Sarah quickly grabbed his leash and they went outside to the small grassy area behind their apartment building. When Buddy relieved himself and then looked up at her with what seemed like gratitude, Sarah felt her first real moment of hope. That afternoon, when Emma came home from school, she found Buddy lying in the living room instead of hiding under her bed. He was still nervous, but he watched her with curious eyes as she did her homework at the kitchen table. "Mom," Emma whispered when Sarah got home from her evening job at the diner. "Buddy came out while I was doing math. He even smelled my backpack." Progress came in tiny steps. On day 7, Buddy ate his breakfast while Emma sat nearby. On day 9, he let Sarah pet him without pulling away. On day 12, he followed Emma from room to room, staying about 5 feet behind her like a shy shadow. The breakthrough came during the 2nd week. Sarah was washing dishes after dinner when she heard Emma giggling in the living room. She peeked around the corner and saw Buddy playing with an old sock that Emma had given him. He was shaking it gently and making small, playful growls. When he saw Sarah watching, he froze for a moment, then picked up the sock and brought it to her feet. "He wants to play with you too, Mom," Emma said, beaming. From that night forward, Buddy became a different dog. It was as if a switch had been flipped, and he finally understood that he was home and safe. He began following both Sarah and Emma around the apartment, his tail wagging more often than not. He would greet them at the door each day, spinning in excited circles. The neighbors began to notice Buddy during their daily walks. Mrs. Chen from upstairs always stopped to say hello, and her twin toddlers loved to pet his soft fur. Mr. Rodriguez, the elderly man who lived next door, started saving scraps from his dinner for Buddy. "That's a good dog you got there," Mr. Rodriguez told Sarah one evening. "Reminds me of the dogs I had when I was young. They know when they've been rescued, you know? They never forget kindness," but it was Mrs. Peterson from apartment 3B who made the observation that would change everything. Mrs. Peterson was a retired teacher who spent her mornings walking around the neighborhood. She had seen Buddy every day for 3 weeks now and had watched his transformation from a scared, skinny stray to a happy, healthy pet. "Sarah," she said one morning as they met in the parking lot, "has anyone ever told you that Buddy looks exactly like the dogs they use for therapy work? He has such a gentle nature and he's so good with children. Have you noticed how he behaves around Emma when she's upset?" Sarah paused to think about it. Mrs. Peterson was right. Whenever Emma had a bad day at school or felt frustrated with homework, Buddy seemed to sense it. He would quietly approach her and rest his head on her lap or lie down beside her feet. His presence always seemed to calm Emma down. "You know," Mrs. Peterson continued, "my sister works at the children's hospital downtown. They're always looking for therapy dogs to visit the patients. It takes special training, but Buddy might be perfect for that kind of work." The idea intrigued Sarah, but she also felt overwhelmed. Buddy had only been with them for 3 weeks. Was she getting ahead of herself thinking about therapy dog training? She had never even owned a dog before, let alone trained one for specialized work. That evening, Sarah researched therapy dogs online while Emma played with Buddy on the living room floor. She learned that therapy dogs visit hospitals, nursing homes, schools, and other facilities to provide comfort to people who are sick, scared, or lonely. The dogs had to pass temperament tests and complete training programs. But the work was incredibly rewarding. As she read, Sarah watched Buddy interact with Emma. When Emma accidentally knocked over her juice cup and started to cry, Buddy immediately went to her side. He didn't jump on her or bark. Instead, he sat quietly next to her and gently licked her hand until she stopped crying and started giggling. "Maybe Mrs. Peterson is onto something," Sarah murmured to herself. The next day was Saturday, and Sarah decided to test Buddy's reaction to new situations. She took him and Emma to the local park, where there were lots of children playing. Sarah was nervous about how Buddy would react to the noise and chaos, but she needn't have worried. Buddy walked calmly beside them, his tail wagging as he watched the children play. When a little boy approached and asked if he could pet Buddy, Sarah hesitated, but Emma encouraged her to say yes. The boy, who looked about 6 years old, was very gentle with Buddy. He stroked his fur softly and spoke to him in a quiet voice. Buddy stood perfectly still, seeming to enjoy the attention. Soon, other children noticed and asked if they could pet him too. For 20 minutes, Buddy was surrounded by children of all ages. He never got excited or overwhelmed. He didn't jump or bark. He simply stood calmly and let each child pet him, his tail wagging gently the entire time. Parents began commenting on how well-behaved and gentle he was. "He's a natural," said one mother whose daughter had been afraid of dogs until she met Buddy. "My Sarah hasn't wanted to be near a dog in 2 years, but look at her now." The little girl was sitting cross-legged on the grass with Buddy lying beside her, her small hand resting on his back as she told him about her day at school. Driving home from the park, Sarah felt a growing excitement. Maybe Buddy's difficult start in life had given him exactly the qualities that would make him perfect for helping others. Maybe his $9 adoption fee was the best money she had ever spent, not just for her family, but for all the people Buddy might help in the future. "Mom," Emma said from the back seat, where she was cuddling with Buddy, "I think Buddy wants to help other kids feel better just like he helps me. Can we teach him how to do that?" Sarah smiled as she looked in the rearview mirror at her daughter and their rescue dog. "I think that's exactly what we should do, sweetheart. I think that's exactly what Buddy wants too." Sarah spent the next week calling therapy dog organizations and learning about the training process. The requirements seemed overwhelming at first. Buddy would need to pass a basic obedience test, then complete specialized therapy dog training that could take several months. The costs for training classes, testing, and certification added up to several $100s. Looking at her tight budget, Sarah felt discouraged. Even with both her jobs at the diner and the grocery store, money was always tight. How could she afford training classes when she barely had enough for rent and groceries? But Emma's enthusiasm kept her motivated. Every day after school, Emma would practice basic commands with Buddy using library books about dog training. "Sit, Buddy, good boy. Now stay." Buddy seemed eager to learn and picked up commands quickly. His intelligence and willingness to please were obvious. Mrs. Peterson noticed their training sessions in the apartment complex courtyard and approached Sarah with an idea. "You know, dear, I've been thinking about what we discussed. I called my sister at the children's hospital, and she's very interested in meeting Buddy. But more than that, she knows someone who might be able to help with the training costs." Sarah's heart leaped with hope. "Really, who?" Dr. Amanda Foster runs a nonprofit organization called Healing Paws. They help train therapy dogs specifically for people who can't afford the full costs. My sister thinks Buddy would be perfect for their program. That evening, Sarah called Dr. Foster's organization. The woman who answered the phone was warm and encouraging. "We'd love to meet Buddy and assess his potential," she said. "Our program is designed to help rescued dogs become therapy animals. especially when their owners are committed but need financial assistance. The following Saturday, Sarah, Emma, and Buddy drove to the Healing Paws training facility on the outskirts of town. The building was modest but welcoming, with a large fenced yard where several dogs were practicing with their handlers. Sarah felt nervous as they walked inside, wondering if Buddy would measure up to the other dogs who all seemed so well-trained and confident. Dr. Foster was a kind woman in her 50s with gray hair and gentle eyes. She knelt down to greet Buddy, who approached her calmly and allowed her to pet him. "He has a wonderful temperament," she observed immediately. "Very calm and gentle. Tell me about his background." Sarah explained how they had found Buddy at the shelter, his rough start in life, and how he had adapted to their family. Dr. Foster listened carefully, occasionally glancing at Buddy, who was sitting quietly beside Emma. "Rescue dogs often make the best therapy animals," Dr. Foster said. "They seem to have a deeper understanding of pain and healing because of what they've been through themselves. Now let's see how Buddy responds to some basic tests." For the next hour, Dr. Foster put Buddy through various scenarios. She dropped a metal pan to see how he reacted to sudden loud noises. Buddy startled but quickly recovered and remained calm. She had strangers approach him while making unusual movements and sounds. Buddy watched carefully but showed no signs of aggression or extreme fear. The most impressive test involved a young volunteer who pretended to cry and fall down. Buddy immediately approached the girl, gently sniffing her and then lying down beside her. When she continued to cry, Buddy placed his head on her arm and stayed perfectly still until she stopped. "That's exactly the response we want to see," Dr. Foster said with excitement. "Buddy has natural instincts for comfort work. He doesn't get overexcited or try to fix the situation by being playful. He simply offers his presence, which is exactly what people need when they're hurting." Emma beamed with pride. "I knew Buddy was special," she said. Dr. Foster explained that Buddy would need to complete 8 weeks of training classes, covering everything from advanced obedience to specific therapy work behaviors. The classes would teach him how to work around medical equipment, how to behave in hospitals and care facilities, and how to remain calm in stressful situations. "The normal cost for our program is $300, Dr. Foster said, "but based on Buddy's potential and your family's situation, we can offer you a scholarship that covers most of the costs. You would only need to pay $50, and that can be spread over the 8 weeks of training." Sarah felt tears of gratitude in her eyes. $50 was still a stretch, but it was manageable if she picked up some extra shifts at work. "When can we start?" "Next week," Dr. Foster replied. "Classes are every Saturday morning for 2 hours. Buddy can start in our beginner group, and if he progresses well, he might be ready for certification testing in just 2 months." The first training class was both exciting and challenging. There were 6 other dogs in Buddy's group, ranging from a golden retriever puppy to an older border collie. Each dog was there with their human partner, and Sarah quickly realized that she needed to learn just as much as Buddy did. The instructor, Maria, taught them about reading dogs' body language, recognizing signs of stress, and how to advocate for their dogs in therapy situations. "Your dog will look to you for guidance," she explained. "If you're nervous or uncertain, your dog will pick up on that energy. You need to be confident and calm so your dog can focus on the people they're helping." Buddy excelled in the structured environment. He learned to visit by approaching people gently and positioning himself so they could easily pet him. He mastered settle, lying down quietly beside someone's chair or bed. Most importantly, he learned to remain calm around wheelchairs, medical equipment, and people who moved or spoke differently than he was used to. By the 4th week of training, Buddy was consistently earning praise from the instructors. Other participants began commenting on his natural abilities. "Your dog was born for this work," said Janet, whose therapy dog was a veteran of 5 years. "I've never seen a dog pick up the concept so quickly." The breakthrough moment came during week 6. The training facility had arranged for some volunteers to simulate a hospital visit. They had hospital beds, IV poles, and even recorded sounds of medical equipment beeping. Some volunteers pretended to be patients lying in beds or sitting in wheelchairs. When it was Buddy's turn to practice, Sarah felt nervous. This was their first time in such a realistic setting, but Buddy walked calmly into the mock hospital room, completely unfazed by the beeping sounds and medical equipment. When he approached the first patient, an elderly volunteer pretending to be sad and lonely, Buddy seemed to sense exactly what was needed. He approached slowly, then sat beside the man's wheelchair, and gently placed his head on the armrest. The volunteer who had been acting found himself genuinely moved by Buddy's presence. "This dog really does have a gift," he said softly. Buddy visited 3 more patients during the exercise, adapting his approach to each situation. With a child patient, he was more playful but still gentle. With a patient who seemed nervous about dogs, he kept his distance but remained visible and calm until the person felt comfortable enough to call him over. "Outstanding work," Maria said as they finished the exercise. "Buddy is ready for advanced training. I think he could be certified as early as next month." Emma had been watching from the observation area and ran to hug Buddy as soon as the exercise ended. "You're going to help so many people feel better," she whispered into his fur. Driving home that day, Sarah reflected on the incredible journey they had been on. Just 2 months ago, Buddy had been a scared, abandoned dog that nobody wanted. Now he was well on his way to becoming a certified therapy dog who would bring comfort to people in hospitals, nursing homes, and schools. But more than that, Buddy had already transformed their own lives. He had given Emma a sense of responsibility and purpose. He had brought joy and companionship to their small family, and he had connected them with a community of people who shared their passion for helping others. "You know what's amazing?" Sarah said to Emma as they pulled into their apartment complex parking lot. "We thought we were rescuing Buddy, but I think he's been rescuing us too." Emma nodded thoughtfully. "And now he's going to rescue lots more people. The best $9 we ever spent." Sarah laughed, remembering her hesitation at the shelter just 2 months ago. If someone had told her then that their $9 dog would become a certified therapy animal, she never would have believed it. But Buddy had proven that sometimes the most amazing gifts come in the most unexpected packages. The day of Buddy's certification test arrived on a crisp October morning. Sarah had barely slept the night before, running through all the commands and scenarios they had practiced. Emma was equally nervous and excited, insisting on braiding a small ribbon into Buddy's collar for good luck. What if he gets nervous and forgets everything? Sarah worried aloud as they drove to the testing facility. "Mom, Buddy never forgets anything," Emma said confidently from the back seat, where she was giving Buddy reassuring pets. "He's been practicing for this his whole life, even before we knew it." The testing facility was bustling with activity. 20 dogs and their handlers had gathered for certification testing, and the atmosphere was tense with anticipation. Sarah recognized several dogs from their training classes, including Max, the golden retriever who had struggled with staying calm around medical equipment. Dr. Foster greeted them warmly. "How's our star student feeling today?" she asked, kneeling to pet Buddy, who wagged his tail and gave her hand a gentle lick. The testing process was thorough and challenging. Buddy had to demonstrate basic obedience commands in front of evaluators, remain calm during simulated emergency situations, and show appropriate behavior around people with various disabilities and medical conditions. The first section went smoothly. Buddy performed all his basic commands flawlessly, even when the evaluator deliberately tried to distract him with dropped objects and sudden movements. His calm, focused demeanor impressed everyone watching. The second section tested his reaction to medical equipment and unusual situations. Buddy walked calmly past oxygen tanks, wheelchairs, and beeping monitors. When an evaluator pretended to have a seizure, Buddy did exactly what he had been trained to do. He moved a safe distance away and remained calm, not trying to intervene but staying alert and ready to provide comfort once the emergency passed. But it was the third section that truly showcased Buddy's exceptional abilities. The evaluators had arranged several scenarios with volunteer patients who presented different challenges. The first volunteer was a teenage boy in a wheelchair who seemed withdrawn and uninterested in interaction. Many of the other dogs being tested had tried to force attention on him, which only made him more uncomfortable. When Buddy's turn came, he approached slowly and simply sat beside the wheelchair, not demanding attention but making his presence known. After several minutes, the boy reached down to pet Buddy's head, and a small smile crossed his face. "Excellent approach," the evaluator noted. "Patient-led interaction is exactly what we want to see." The second scenario involved an elderly woman volunteer who was pretending to be agitated and confused, simulating symptoms of dementia. Several dogs had become stressed by her loud voice and erratic movements, but Buddy seemed to understand that her behavior came from distress, not aggression. He approached carefully and lay down at her feet, staying calm despite her continued agitation. Gradually, the woman's voice softened and she began gently stroking Buddy's fur. "That's remarkable," one evaluator whispered to another. "He has incredible instincts for this work." The final and most challenging scenario involved a young girl, about Emma's age, who was afraid of dogs due to a previous bad experience. The volunteer child sat in a corner, clearly nervous as each dog was brought to meet her. Some dogs had tried to approach directly, which only increased her fear. Others had ignored her completely. When Buddy entered the room, he immediately sensed the child's anxiety. Instead of approaching her, he went to the opposite corner and lay down, making himself as non-threatening as possible. He didn't stare at her or try to get her attention. He simply made himself available if she chose to interact. For 10 long minutes, nothing happened. Sarah began to worry that Buddy was failing this crucial test by not engaging with the patient. But Dr. Foster, who was observing, whispered, "Trust him. He knows what he's doing." Slowly, gradually, the young girl began glancing at Buddy. She noticed that he wasn't trying to force himself on her, wasn't demanding her attention. When she shifted slightly in her chair, Buddy's tail gave a barely perceptible wag, but he didn't move toward her. Finally, curiosity overcame fear. The girl stood up and took a small step toward Buddy. He remained lying down, making himself smaller and less intimidating. She took another step, then another. When she was close enough, she reached out hesitantly and touched his fur. Buddy stayed perfectly still, allowing her to set the pace of their interaction. When she sat down beside him, he gently rested his head near her leg. Not on it, but close enough that she could feel his warmth and presence. For the remaining few minutes of the test, the girl sat peacefully with Buddy, her initial fear completely gone. "That," said the head evaluator, "is exactly what therapy dog work is all about. Reading the patient's needs and responding appropriately, even when it means doing nothing at all." After the testing was complete, all the participants waited anxiously for results. Dogs and handlers were called one by one to receive their evaluations. Some passed with commendations, others passed with recommendations for additional training, and unfortunately, a few didn't pass and would need to retest later. When Buddy's name was called, Sarah's heart pounded as they approached the evaluation table. Dr. Foster was beaming, which Sarah took as a good sign. "Buddy has passed his certification with the highest possible rating," the head evaluator announced. "In my 15 years of evaluating therapy dogs, I have rarely seen such natural instincts combined with excellent training. This dog is ready to begin therapy work immediately." Emma cheered so loudly that everyone in the room turned to look at them. Sarah felt tears of pride and joy streaming down her face as she hugged both Emma and Buddy. "But that's not all," Dr. Foster continued. "Based on Buddy's exceptional performance today, we would like to invite him to join our advanced therapy dog program. We have a special partnership with the Children's Hospital, where we place our most gifted therapy dogs for intensive work with young patients." Sarah could hardly believe what she was hearing. What would that involve? Buddy would work 2 days a week at the Children's Hospital, visiting patients who are facing serious illnesses or lengthy stays. It's challenging work, but also incredibly rewarding. The program provides additional training and ongoing support, and it's completely voluntary. Emma looked up at her mother with shining eyes. "Can we do it, Mom? Can Buddy help the sick kids at the hospital?" Sarah looked down at Buddy, who was sitting calmly beside them, still wearing his lucky ribbon. Just 4 months ago, he had been an unwanted shelter dog with a $9 price tag. Now he was being invited to join an elite program for therapy dogs. "I think," Sarah said slowly, "that Buddy has been telling us all along what he wants to do with his life. Yes, we'd be honored to join the hospital program." As they drove home that afternoon, Buddy wearing his new therapy dog vest and certification badge, Sarah reflected on the incredible journey they had been on. She thought about that day at the shelter when she had wondered if $9 was too good to be true. Now she understood that Buddy's low price had nothing to do with his worth. Sometimes the most valuable things in life are the ones that others have overlooked or given up on. Sometimes the best investments are the ones that seem risky at first but pay dividends you never imagined. "Hey, Mom," Emma said from the back seat. "Do you think Buddy always knew he was meant to help people?" Sarah glanced in the rearview mirror at her daughter and their remarkable dog. "I think some souls just naturally understand their purpose, sweetheart. I think we were lucky enough to find Buddy right when he was ready to find his calling." Buddy's tail wagged gently as if he understood every word. Tomorrow, their real work would begin at the children's hospital. But tonight, Sarah felt nothing but gratitude for the $9 miracle that had transformed not just their lives, but would soon touch the lives of countless others. 6 months later, Buddy had become a legend at St. Mary's Children's Hospital. Nurses would call down to the therapy dog coordinator, asking specifically for the brown and white dog with the magic touch. Parents would request Buddy for their children's difficult procedures. Even doctors had begun to notice the remarkable difference in their young patients' stress levels after a visit from Buddy. Sarah had arranged her work schedule so she could volunteer with Buddy every Tuesday and Thursday morning. What had started as a way to help her rescued dog find purpose had become the most meaningful part of her own week. Their first regular patient was 7-year-old Marcus, a boy with leukemia who had been in the hospital for 2 months. Marcus had been aggressive and uncooperative with medical staff, angry about his illness and frightened by the constant procedures. Traditional therapy approaches had failed to reach him. When Buddy first entered Marcus's room, the boy had turned his face to the wall and refused to acknowledge them. Sarah had started to leave, thinking it wasn't a good match, but Buddy had other ideas. He had simply laid down beside Marcus's bed and waited. For 30 minutes, Buddy lay perfectly still while Marcus ignored him. But gradually, the boy began stealing glances at the calm dog beside his bed. When Marcus finally reached his hand down to touch Buddy's fur, something shifted. The angry, scared little boy began to relax. Over the following weeks, Marcus began looking forward to Buddy's visits. He would save stories from his day to tell Buddy, and he started cooperating better with his medical team because he knew Buddy would be coming soon. When Marcus finally went into remission and was discharged, he hugged Buddy tightly and whispered, "Thank you for being my friend when I couldn't be a friend to anyone." Word of Buddy's success spread throughout the hospital. Dr. Jennifer Walsh, the head of pediatric oncology, began specifically requesting Buddy for her most difficult cases. "There's something special about that dog," she told Sarah one Thursday morning. "He seems to understand pain in a way that other therapy dogs don't. I think it's because he's been through his own trauma." The case that would make Buddy famous beyond the hospital involved 8-year-old Sophie Chen, a girl who had been in a car accident that left her paralyzed from the waist down. Sophie had stopped speaking entirely since the accident. Trapped in depression and grief for the life she had lost, traditional therapy, counseling, and even visits from other therapy dogs had failed to reach Sophie. She lay in her hospital bed staring at the ceiling, unresponsive to everyone around her. Her parents were desperate, and the medical team was running out of options. When Dr. Walsh suggested trying Buddy, Sophie's parents were skeptical. "She won't even look at the other therapy dogs," her mother said sadly. "I don't think any dog can help her now." But Dr. Walsh had seen Buddy work with seemingly hopeless cases before. "Just give him one chance," she urged. When Sarah and Buddy entered Sophie's room, the little girl didn't move or acknowledge their presence. Sarah had learned from experience not to force interactions, so she simply sat in the chair beside Sophie's bed while Buddy lay down on the floor nearby. For the entire hour-long visit, no one spoke. Sophie stared at the ceiling while Buddy rested quietly beside her bed. When their time was up, Sarah and Buddy left without having made any apparent progress. But they returned the next Tuesday, and the next Thursday, and the next Tuesday after that. Each visit followed the same pattern: quiet presence without demands or expectations. Sarah began to wonder if they were helping at all, but something told her to keep coming. The breakthrough came during their 7th visit, 6 weeks after they had first met Sophie. Sarah was sitting quietly reading a book when she heard a small sound. Looking up, she saw Sophie's hand hanging over the side of her hospital bed, her fingers gently stroking Buddy's fur. Buddy hadn't moved to approach Sophie. She had reached out to him. For the rest of that visit, Sophie continued to pet Buddy while he lay perfectly still, allowing her to set the pace of their interaction. The next visit brought another small breakthrough. When Sarah and Buddy arrived, Sophie turned her head slightly to watch them enter the room. She didn't speak, but her eyes followed Buddy as he settled into his usual spot beside her bed. By their 10th visit, Sophie was sitting up in bed when they arrived. By their 15th visit, she was asking the nurses when the brown and white dog would come to see her. And during their 20th visit, something miraculous happened. Sophie, who hadn't spoken in 4 months, looked down at Buddy and whispered, "What's your name?" Sarah nearly cried with joy but kept her voice calm and gentle. His name is Buddy. He's been waiting to meet you properly." From that day forward, Sophie began her journey back to communication and engagement with the world. She started participating in physical therapy because she wanted to be strong enough to pet Buddy properly. She began eating better because Buddy worried when she didn't finish her meals. She started talking to her parents again, telling them about her daily visits with her best friend Buddy. Word of Sophie's remarkable progress spread throughout the hospital and then to the local media. A reporter from the town newspaper wanted to write a story about the therapy dog who was helping children heal. When they learned about Buddy's background, rescued from a shelter for $9 and trained through a scholarship program, the story captured the community's imagination. The article, titled "From Shelter to Sanctuary, the $9 Dog Healing Hearts," appeared on the front page of the Sunday paper. It told the complete story of Buddy's journey from abandoned stray to certified therapy dog, highlighting not just his work at the hospital but the transformation he had brought to Sarah and Emma's life as well. The response was overwhelming. The newspaper received hundreds of calls and emails from readers who were moved by Buddy's story. Donations poured into the Healing Paws organization, allowing them to help train dozens more therapy dogs. The animal shelter where Buddy had been adopted reported a surge in people wanting to adopt older, overlooked dogs. Most importantly, several families inspired by Buddy's story decided to look beyond the typical puppies and purebreds to give chances to dogs that others had passed by. The shelter's adoption rates for older dogs increased by 300% in the month following the article. Dr. Foster called Sarah with news that would change their lives even more. A major pet food company read about Buddy's story and wants to sponsor a documentary about therapy dogs. They specifically want to feature Buddy and follow him through his work at the hospital. It would raise awareness about therapy dog programs across the country. The documentary, Healing Hearts: The Buddy Story, aired on national television 6 months later. It showed Buddy working with patients at the hospital, featured interviews with children whose lives he had touched, and told the story of how a $9 shelter dog had become a beacon of hope for families facing their darkest moments. The night the documentary aired, Sarah, Emma, and Buddy watched it together in their living room. Emma had grown 2 inches and gained confidence from her role as Buddy's co-therapist at the hospital. Sarah had found her calling in therapy dog work and was considering going back to school to become a certified animal-assisted therapy specialist. As for Buddy, he remained the same gentle, intuitive dog who had stolen their hearts that first day at the shelter, but now he was also a symbol of second chances, of the incredible potential that exists in forgotten souls, and of the healing power of unconditional love. "You know what's amazing?" Emma said as the documentary credits rolled. "A year ago, nobody wanted Buddy. Now thousands of people know his name and love him." Sarah looked down at Buddy, who was sleeping peacefully between them on the couch, wearing his therapy dog vest even at home because Emma insisted it made him extra official. She thought about all the children he visited each week, all the families he had helped heal, and all the other shelter dogs who would get second chances because of his story. "Sometimes," Sarah said softly, "the most important question isn't how much something costs, but how much it's truly worth." "And Buddy?" She scratched behind his ears as he stirred slightly in his sleep. "Buddy is absolutely priceless." Outside, the town that had watched Buddy's transformation was settling in for the night. But in hospital rooms across the city, children were sleeping more peacefully because they knew that tomorrow or the next day, a special brown and white dog named Buddy would come to remind them that they were not alone, that healing was possible, and that sometimes the greatest gifts really do come in the most unexpected packages. The $9 dog had indeed amazed everyone in town, but more than that, he had shown them all something profound about the value of second chances, the power of love, and the magic that happens when broken souls find each other and help each other heal.